Welcome back to another Photoshop CS6 tutorial, everyone. My name is Buddy Blackford, and today let's go over the Smart Sharpen filter. And this is a really good sharpening filter that you can use to attempt to refocus some blurry images or sharpen the edges of blurry images. And one of the cool things about the Smart Sharpen filter is that you can remove some effects or some filters that you've added on, like the Gaussian blur or Gaussian, however you like to say it, or a lens blur or a motion blur. And it has it has like a drop-down menu in there that you can use to get rid of that stuff. So let's go ahead and look at how this works. So let's duplicate our background layer. That way we have something to compare the effect to, so we can compare it to like the original image. Let's go to filter, and we're going to apply the Smart Sharpen to it without adding any like Gaussian blur or anything like that. So let's just stay on the basic tab and make sure you have your preview button checked so we can see what's going on in the main picture. And I'll put this over here so we can see what's going on. Now the amount here is just the amount of sharpness that's applied to the image, and usually 100% is pretty good. And then the radius here, you can determine the width of the sharpening effect. So I'll bring this back down to 0, and bring this down to 0 so we can see what's going on. And I'm gonna move this over here to where the actually I'll move it over here where the hair is so we can see this area here. Okay, now let's start applying the effect. Let's go to this to like 100%, and then we'll come over and bring the radius up, and you can already see that when I did that, the shoulder area got way more sharper. So I'll bring this back again, and you can see blurry shoulder. Bring this up even to just like 1.5 pixels. Oh, come on. And now it's like even way sharper. So I'm going to just bring this up to 2. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then we've got nice sharp edges on here that aren't blurry, which is pretty nice. They don't blend in with the background as much. Now, remember I was telling you about you can remove some of the filters that you put on. We've got the Gaussian, lens, and motion blur on here. And then we've got this right here, which is more accurate, which gives like a more accurate but a slower, and it uses more RAM. So the sharpen filter is more accurate, but it's a lot slower to use. So I'm just, oh yeah, there's definitely a change in here when you click on more accurate. So this is with it off. Then just take a second to look in this preview area right here. You can see how the more accurate affects it. There it goes. It takes like a second to pop in, but it's definitely giving them way more detail in her hair and more contrast and everything like that. So we've got this angle right here, and this only applies when you have the motion blur on, because the motion blur is kind of like an angular blur, and it goes in the direction that the motion is going in. Since there's no motion in this, that we wouldn't want to ever use that. You wouldn't want to use motion blur on this. Now there is an advanced tab. Let's click on that. You get the shadow and highlight here. And the place where I saw the most amount of change when I was doing this is down here in the leg area, because there is shadows and highlights, a pretty decent contrast going on there. So let's come to our shadows. We've got the fade amount here, and that determines the amount that we've got, the amount of correction that's being applied. So let's bring back this tonal width all the way down. We've got our more accurate checked, so that's good. So our tonal width here is pretty much the width of the amount, so kind of like the radius a little bit. And then the radius here is the scale of the size of the Smart Sharpen that we're putting on the shadows. So let's bring this up maybe 100%, or bring it up to where it looks good, starts looking good. Bring up your tonal width a decent amount, and then your radius. And you can kind of see that like the shadowy areas are getting a little more sharpened. Same thing with the highlights. I can bring this up and you can just see the different. If you bring up the fade here, it looks like it's getting a lot more blurry. You can definitely see it on the left side of the, you can definitely see it on the left side of the leg here. That's with the fade amount to 0, and this is with the fade amount to 100%. So you can see how that works. Now check it out here. This is the fade amount to 0 on the leg, and then you bring up the fade amount to 100%. Let's see. Not as much difference with the shadows here, but definitely more difference with the highlight, as you can see. Okay, now let's see if there's anything else to go over. And there is one more thing I wanted to go over. Actually, a couple. Let's put on one like a Gaussian blur and see what happens when we try to remove it. It does its best to try to remove it. So let's go to filter, and we'll apply blur, Gaussian blur, and let's jack it up to like 3 pixels so we can see more. You can see how it's pretty blurry here as that compared to the other one. That's without blur, and this is with the blur. Now let's apply the smart filter, or the smart sharpen. There we go. And we got the blur on there. We're trying to take that off. Maybe increase the amount a little more. More accurate. Let's see how well it does. Hit OK. And give it some time to compute. There we go. And it tries to take away the Gaussian blur. It doesn't do the best job at it, but it's better than nothing if you're trying to get rid of it. So mess around with the settings, mess around with all that stuff to try to get a better sharpen on your blurred images. So that's all there is for the Smart Sharpen filter. And I hope you guys enjoy that filter. I use it a decent amount to try to make everything look really nice and pop out. Sometimes what I do on like a picture, on like an image like this, I'll isolate the main focal point here, which is the woman with the skateboard, and then I'll cut it out and I'll apply the smart sharpen there to the focal point, and it'll stand out from the background a lot more instead of like pulling out instead of the smart sharpen pulling out some of the background image. So just keep that in mind when you're using the filter, and use it to your advantage. Well, thanks for watching this tutorial. Hopefully you guys learned something, and I want you guys to have a good day. See you guys later.